forced to live with a billionaire CEO. Omega never imagined he would fall for him by the time billionaire CEO Adrian Sterling abandoned the most important board meeting of his career. Caleb Brooks was already standing beside the private elevator with his entire life packed into 2 cardboard boxes. The penthouse behind him was silent again. The lavender plant beside the window still leaned toward the morning sun. 2 coffee cups sat in the kitchen, one untouched. On the wall hung an unfinished sketch of 2 men sharing breakfast beneath a skyline Caleb had once believed he would never be allowed to call home. His hand hovered over the elevator button. If he pressed it, the doors would close on everything that had happened between them. The unexpected breakfasts. The evenings spent listening to rain against the glass. The alpha who had protected him when the entire city tried to turn his identity into a scandal. And the love Caleb had never intended to feel. He pressed the button. Across Manhattan, Adrian rose from the head of a 30-foot conference table while 12 board members stared at him in disbelief. "Where are you going?" one director demanded. "The vote begins in 10 minutes. Adrian closed the folder containing the future of his billion-dollar company. "To stop the biggest mistake of my life." He walked out before anyone could answer. But 6 months earlier, Caleb and Adrian had been complete strangers, and neither of them had wanted to share the same roof. Before we return to the day everything changed, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you never miss another emotional love story. And tell us in the comments, could you ever fall in love with someone you were forced to live with? 6 months earlier, Caleb Brooks had been sitting inside a small Manhattan coffee shop, finishing the final illustration for a children's book about a lonely fox searching for a family. At 25, Caleb had already learned that talent did not guarantee stability. His freelance work paid just enough to cover rent, suppressants, groceries, and the occasional cup of coffee he bought when he needed somewhere warm to work. He had no savings worth mentioning, no relatives in New York, and no partner waiting at home. But the small apartment above an old art supply store belonged to him. Its windows rattled whenever buses passed below. The kitchen sink only produced hot water when it felt generous. The ceiling carried a crack shaped like a crooked river. Caleb loved every imperfect inch of it. It was the first home he had found after his mother died. His phone rang shortly after noon. The building manager sounded breathless. A water main had ruptured beneath the property. The basement had flooded, part of the foundation had shifted, and emergency engineers were ordering every tenant to evacuate immediately. By the time Caleb reached the building, firefighters had blocked the entrance. Residents crowded the sidewalk beneath a cold gray sky, while water streamed through the front doors. Caleb pleaded with an officer until he was allowed 5 minutes inside with an escort. He returned carrying a weathered duffel bag. Inside were several changes of clothes, a box of pencils, 2 sketchbooks, his medication, and a faded photograph of his mother holding him when he was a child. Everything else remained behind. His books, his illustrations, the ceramic fox his mother had given him on his 18th birthday, the quilt she had sewn during the final winter of her life. Caleb stood on the sidewalk and watched water drip from the apartment windows. For several seconds, he could not breathe. His secondary designation had never defined everything about him, but being an unbonded Omega made finding emergency housing painfully difficult. 2 hotels claimed they had no scent-neutral rooms available. A short-term rental host canceled the moment Caleb completed the legally required designation form. Another demanded a deposit nearly 3 times the advertised amount. By sunset, he had nowhere to go. Then an attorney named Evelyn Shaw called him. She represented the Eleanor Sterling Foundation, a charitable organization established by the late mother of Adrian Sterling, the alpha billionaire whose technology empire occupied half the financial headlines in the country. Caleb nearly ended the call, convinced it was some kind of mistake. Evelyn explained that Caleb's mother, Miriam Brooks, had worked for the foundation for nearly 12 years. She had helped Eleanor Sterling create one of the country's first emergency housing programs for vulnerable Omegas and single-parent families. As part of that program, former employees and their children remained eligible for temporary assistance during a certified housing crisis. Caleb knew his mother had worked for a foundation. He had never known the program still covered him. "There is one complication," Evelyn said. Caleb looked at the rejected hotel reservations on his phone. "Of course there is. Every apartment owned by the foundation was already occupied or undergoing legally required scent control renovations. Only one approved residence remained available, the private Manhattan penthouse of Adrian Sterling. Caleb laughed once, certain he had misunderstood. You want me to live with Adrian Sterling? Temporarily. He doesn't know me. He has approved the arrangement. That doesn't mean he wants a stranger in his home. Evelyn paused. No, she admitted. It probably does not. Caleb considered sleeping in the coffee shop until someone noticed. He considered calling people he had not spoken to in years. He considered ignoring the situation until the cold became unbearable. Then the rain began. 2 hours later, a private car stopped beneath the entrance of one of Manhattan's tallest residential towers. Caleb stepped out carrying one wet duffel bag and every reservation he possessed. The private elevator opened directly into a penthouse wrapped in glass. Marble floors reflected the evening skyline. Modern paintings hung beneath carefully placed lights. A grand piano stood near the windows, untouched and gleaming. Every object appeared valuable enough to belong behind a museum barrier. Yet the apartment felt strangely lifeless. Standing near the windows was Adrian Sterling. At 34, Adrian was one of the youngest chief executives ever to transform a failing technology company into an international empire. Magazines described him as brilliant, disciplined, merciless in negotiations, and almost impossible to know personally. They also described him as one of the most influential unmated alphas in America. Caleb had expected arrogance. Instead, when Adrian turned around, Caleb saw exhaustion hidden beneath perfect control. Adrian wore a charcoal suit with no tie. His dark hair was neatly styled, and his expression revealed nothing beyond polite restraint. His natural alpha scent, cedar, black tea, and something quietly warm, was held behind a medical-grade suppressant. Caleb appreciated the consideration. Neither man spoke for several seconds. Finally, Adrian looked at the duffel bag beside Caleb's feet. Is that everything? Everything I could save. Something shifted in Adrian's eyes before disappearing. Your room is in the East Wing. It has an independent ventilation system and an emergency lock you control from inside. Caleb straightened. You prepared a scent-neutral room? My mother designed it for visiting Omega advocates. I had it inspected this afternoon. Caleb had not expected that. Thank you. Adrian nodded toward a folder resting on the dining table. There are 4 house rules. Caleb opened it. Respect each other's privacy. Do not enter the private office. Communicate any medical scent change before it becomes an emergency. Do not mistake obligation for affection. Caleb read the final sentence twice. That one is unusually specific. It prevents misunderstandings. Has it worked before? No one has lived here before. Caleb lifted his eyes. Then how do you know it works? For the first time, Adrian appeared almost uncomfortable. I don't. A quiet roll of thunder moved beyond the windows. Caleb closed the folder. You don't need to worry, Mr. Sterling. I know why I'm here. And why is that? Because an old legal promise left you with no polite way to say no. Adrian held his gaze. I could have refused. But you didn't. My mother created that promise for a reason. That still doesn't make me your responsibility. No, Adrian said quietly. It makes you my guest. The answer was gentler than Caleb expected. Adrian pointed toward the hallway. Dinner is delivered at 7. You are welcome to join me, but you are under no obligation. Caleb glanced around the immaculate apartment. Do you always eat alone? Adrian's expression became unreadable again. I usually work. He walked toward his office, leaving Caleb beneath a ceiling twice as high as the apartment he had lost. The office door closed. Caleb looked down at the rule in his hand. Do not mistake obligation for affection. That won't be a problem, he whispered. At the time, he believed it. The following morning, Caleb woke before sunrise. For several seconds, he forgot where he was. Then he saw the unfamiliar ceiling, the expensive furniture, and the city suspended beyond the bedroom windows. He placed his mother's photograph on the bedside table and arranged his pencils beside his sketchbook. Those small belongings softened the guest's suite, but they could not make it feel like his. When he entered the kitchen, Adrian was already there. The alpha stood beside an espresso machine, studying financial reports on a tablet. He wore another dark suit, and a cup of black coffee rested untouched near his hand. Caleb opened the refrigerator. It contained perfectly arranged ingredients that looked as though no one had ever used them. You have enough food to feed 6 people, Caleb observed. My staff restocks it. Do they know you don't eat? Adrian looked up. I eat. Coffee isn't breakfast. It has been for several years. Caleb removed eggs, butter, tomatoes, and bread. Within 20 minutes, the apartment smelled of toasted sourdough, scrambled eggs, and fresh coffee. Adrian attempted to continue reading, but looked toward the stove 3 times. Caleb placed a plate across from him. You don't have to eat it. Adrian studied the food. Then why did you make 2 plates? Hope. Hope. I hoped you possessed enough survival instinct to recognize breakfast. A faint smile touched Adrian's mouth. He set his tablet aside. After the first bite, his expression softened almost imperceptibly. This is good. Caleb leaned against the counter. You sound surprised. I'm not accustomed to waking up to someone cooking. I'm not accustomed to waking up inside a billionaire's penthouse. We're both adapting. That morning became the beginning of a routine neither of them acknowledged. Caleb made breakfast. Adrian washed the dishes before leaving for work. Caleb spent his days searching for illustration contracts and attending online meetings near the windows. Adrian returned after dark, usually carrying several folders and the weight of decisions no one else could see. Their conversations remained short, but small details slowly accumulated. Adrian learned Caleb hated raisins, but loved cinnamon bread. Caleb learned Adrian loosened his watch whenever he was worried. Adrian began purchasing the coffee Caleb preferred. Caleb started leaving dinner in the refrigerator on nights Adrian returned late. Nothing about the arrangement resembled affection. At least, that was what they told themselves. One Friday afternoon, Adrian arrived home 3 hours early. His tie was loose, his coat hung over one arm, and fatigue had weakened the careful barriers around his scent. The cedar and black tea reached Caleb before Adrian noticed him. Caleb's omega instincts responded with a brief, unwanted flutter beneath his ribs. He immediately stepped back, embarrassed by his own reaction. Adrian stopped near the entrance. Is my scent bothering you? No, that was not a convincing answer. Caleb folded his arms. It surprised me. Adrian removed a small suppressant patch from his pocket. I can replace this. You're in your own home, and you are an omega living in it. Your comfort matters too. The words disarmed Caleb more effectively than any charm could have. Before he could answer, Adrian's phone rang. Yes, Adrian said, walking toward the office. Transfer the additional funds tonight. The pediatric clinic cannot postpone treatment because our legal department wants another week of paperwork. He listened briefly. No publicity. Remove my name from the donation. Another pause. Because sick children are not an advertising strategy. The office door closed behind him. Caleb remained in the kitchen, staring at the vegetables he had been cutting. The world saw Adrian Sterling as a ruthless alpha who measured everything in profit. Caleb had just heard him quietly double a medical donation and refuse credit for it. That evening, Adrian left a leather portfolio on the dining table. A page had slipped partly free, revealing plans for a community arts center. Caleb recognized his mother's handwriting in one of the scanned notes. Every child deserves a safe place to imagine a different future. He touched the edge of the page without lifting it. You can look. Adrian's voice came from behind him. Caleb turned quickly. I wasn't trying to pry. It isn't confidential. Adrian opened the portfolio. The project included free art classes, counseling rooms, a library, emergency housing assistance, and an advocacy office for young omegas facing discrimination. My mother designed it with yours, Adrian explained. Construction stopped after they both became ill. I have been trying to complete it. Caleb looked at a photograph of Miriam and Eleanor standing beside a hand-painted sign. His mother appeared younger, laughing with one arm around Eleanor's shoulders. I've never seen this. Adrian studied the photograph. My mother kept hundreds of records from those years. Your mother mattered to her. Caleb swallowed the pressure gathering in his throat. She never talked much about her work near the end. I think she wanted me to remember her as my mother, not as someone who was sick. Adrian's expression softened. Mine did the same. For the first time, they spoke about the women they had lost. Caleb described Miriam singing badly while cooking and pretending burned toast was intentional. Adrian spoke about Eleanor playing the piano after midnight when she could not sleep. Is that why no one touches it? Caleb asked, glancing toward the grand piano. Adrian looked at the instrument. I haven't played since she died. Dinner went cold while they talked. Later, Adrian asked to see Caleb's sketchbook. Caleb hesitated before handing it over. Adrian slowly turned the pages. He found commuters sleeping against train windows, children chasing pigeons, an elderly alpha tying his Omega husband's scarf, and strangers sharing umbrellas during storms. "You draw moments most people ignore," Adrian said. "Buildings can be impressive," Caleb answered. "People are what make them matter." Adrian looked around his penthouse. Perhaps that is what this place has been missing. The admission was so quiet Caleb almost pretended not to hear it. Over the following weeks, the apartment began changing. A blanket appeared on the sofa. Books accumulated on the coffee table. Caleb's pencils migrated from the guest room to the windows. Music played during dinner. The grand piano no longer gathered dust because one night Adrian finally sat down and played the song his mother had loved. He stopped after the first verse. Caleb did not offer sympathy. He simply sat nearby until Adrian was ready to continue. The next morning, several boxes arrived. Inside were green plants, ceramic pots, warm cushions, and framed photographs of landscapes. An envelope rested on top. Caleb recognized Adrian's handwriting. "Every home deserves warmth." "You were right." Caleb read the sentence 3 times. It was not the cost of the gifts that affected him. Adrian had listened. For a man who rarely revealed his feelings, listening was a form of intimacy. 3 days later, Caleb woke with a fever. His hands trembled as he reached for his medication. The replacement suppressants he had received after the flood were a different brand, and his body had begun rejecting them. A warning pulsed on his phone. Preheat hormonal instability detected. His next natural heat was not due for 2 weeks. He locked the bedroom door and activated the scent-neutral ventilation, but a thin trace of distressed Omega scent had already escaped into the hallway. Adrian noticed immediately. He stopped outside the door without touching it. "Caleb, I'm fine." "You are not. It's a reaction to the new suppressants. I can handle it. Have you called a doctor?" "The clinic put me on hold." Adrian's alpha scent disappeared almost completely. He had applied emergency blockers. "I can call a private specialist." "I can't afford one." "I did not ask whether you could afford one." Caleb closed his eyes. "I don't want to owe you more. You do not owe me for being safe." The words passed through the door and settled somewhere deep inside him. Adrian contacted a physician from the Foundation's Omega Health Network. He placed water, medicine, clean towels, and a cooling pack outside the room, then moved to a hotel so his alpha presence would not aggravate Caleb's symptoms. Before leaving, he sent one message. "The penthouse is yours until the doctor says you are stable. I will not return without your permission." Caleb stared at the screen. Many alphas spoke beautifully about protecting omegas. Fewer understood that protection sometimes meant stepping away. Adrian did. Caleb's heat never fully developed. The doctor corrected his medication, and the fever disappeared by the following evening. When Adrian returned, he remained near the elevator. "May I come in?" Caleb nearly laughed. "You live here." "That wasn't my question." Caleb looked at the powerful man waiting for permission to enter his own home. "Yes," he said softly. "You can come in." Adrian stepped forward. Caleb held out a paper bag from the bakery downstairs. "What is that?" "Cinnamon bread." "For me." "You abandoned your penthouse for 2 days because my body panicked. I thought breakfast was appropriate." Adrian accepted the bag. "You never need to thank me for respecting you." "Then don't consider it thanks." "What should I consider it?" Caleb met his eyes. "Hope." The same faint smile returned. This time, Caleb felt it in his chest. Their first Saturday outside the penthouse began at a neighborhood market. Adrian wore jeans, a dark sweater, and a baseball cap Caleb insisted would make him look ordinary. "It does not," Caleb said after studying him. "You chose it." "I overestimated the power of the hat." Adrian laughed, and several people turned toward the unfamiliar sound. They walked between flower stalls, bakeries, and local artists. Without assistants or board members following him, Adrian's shoulders gradually relaxed. At a small table near the end of the market, a teenage Omega displayed watercolor paintings. Most customers glanced at the work before moving on. Caleb stopped. The young artist admitted it was his first public sale. His family wanted him to choose a more appropriate career because creative work was considered too unstable for an Omega without a bond. Caleb understood that fear. He spent several minutes discussing the paintings and offered practical advice about commissions. While they spoke, Adrian quietly purchased 3 pieces. The artist stared at him. You don't have to do that. I know. Then why are you buying them? Because they are good. The young Omega's face brightened. As Caleb and Adrian walked away, Caleb glanced at the paintings beneath Adrian's arm. You didn't tell him who you were. He needed a customer, not a powerful alpha doing charity. Caleb smiled. Your mother taught you that? She said kindness should never make the other person feel smaller. At a flower stand, Caleb picked up a lavender plant. My mother used to grow these. Adrian purchased it before Caleb could see the price. Back at the penthouse, they placed it beside the windows. That evening they cooked together. Adrian held a potato as though it were an unfamiliar piece of technology. You run an international company, Caleb said. How can you not peel a potato? My company has departments for tasks requiring specialized knowledge. This is a vegetable. Exactly. Outside my expertise. Caleb laughed until his eyes watered. Adrian watched him with an expression so open that the laughter slowly faded. For one suspended moment, they stood too close. Caleb noticed the warmth of Adrian's body and the carefully restrained trace of cedar between them. Adrian's gaze dropped briefly to Caleb's lips before returning to his eyes. Neither man moved. The apartment intercom interrupted them. Adrian stepped away first. That night, Caleb lay awake and admitted a truth he had been avoiding. He was falling for the alpha whose rules had warned them both not to mistake obligation for affection. The outside world noticed their growing closeness before they spoke about it. A photographer captured them leaving the market together. Another obtained an image of Caleb standing beside Adrian's penthouse windows. The following morning, a headline appeared across multiple gossip sites. Billionaire Alpha hiding secret Omega in private penthouse. The article described Caleb as an unemployed opportunist. It suggested he had manipulated Adrian during a vulnerable heat and implied Adrian had awarded foundation contracts to companies connected to Caleb. None of it was true. By noon, Caleb's email was filled with insults. A publisher postponed his illustration contract because it did not want to be associated with a designation scandal. Someone posted the address of his damaged apartment. Reporters gathered outside Sterling Holdings. Adrian returned home before sunset, surrounded by security. Caleb stood beside the window, reading the article for the 10th time. I'm sorry, he said. Adrian's expression hardened. For what? For becoming a problem. You did not create this. I'm living in your home. People will believe what they want. Then they will be wrong. That has never stopped them before. Adrian removed his coat. My legal team is tracing the leak. Caleb looked at him. The photograph was taken inside this building. I know. Someone close to you did this. Yes. For the first time, Caleb heard anger beneath Adrian's control. That evening, Victor Mercer, vice chairman of Sterling Technologies, arrived at the penthouse. He was an older alpha with polished manners and a smile that never reached his eyes. Adrian had been called into an emergency meeting downstairs, leaving Caleb alone when Victor stepped from the elevator. I came to prevent further damage, Victor explained. He placed an envelope on the dining table. Inside was a check large enough to pay Caleb's rent for several years. What is this? A practical solution. Leave the penthouse tonight. Sign a statement confirming there was never a personal relationship, and disappear until the media finds another story. Caleb pushed the check back. There is no relationship to deny. Then leaving should be easy. Caleb held his gaze. Did you leak the photographs? Victor smiled faintly. Young Omegas often confuse attention with power. Adrian has spent his life building something extraordinary. If you care about him, you will stop making him choose between his company and a temporary fascination. The insult hurt because it touched Caleb's deepest fear. What if Adrian's kindness was temporary? What if Caleb had turned obligation into a fantasy because he desperately wanted somewhere to belong? Victor moved the check closer. You arrived with one bag. Leave with enough money to build a comfortable life. Caleb tore the check in half. My mother helped build the foundation your company uses to advertise its values. I will not let you purchase my silence with money taken from the work she believed in. Victor's expression turned cold. Then do not be surprised when Adrian loses everything because of you. When Adrian returned, Caleb told him what had happened. Within an hour, Victor's access to the building was revoked and an internal investigation began. But the board refused to dismiss him without evidence. Victor controlled enough votes to threaten Adrian's position as CEO. The company's annual foundation gala was scheduled for the following week. Canceling it would appear like an admission of wrongdoing. Attending together would intensify the scandal. Adrian told Caleb he did not have to go. Caleb looked at the photograph of their mothers beside the unfinished community center plans. I'm not going for the reporters. I'm going because they began something worth defending. They entered the gala through a wall of cameras. The ballroom fell briefly silent when Adrian placed a steady hand at the center of Caleb's back, not possessively, but as a quiet promise that Caleb would not face the room alone. During dinner, Adrian announced that construction on the Eleanor Sterling Community Arts Center would begin in the spring. Applause filled the ballroom. Then a reporter stood. Mr. Sterling, can you confirm whether the Omega living in your penthouse influenced the allocation of foundation funds? Adrian's expression became dangerously calm. His name is Caleb Brooks. Are you denying a personal relationship? I am denying your assumption that an Omega must exchange affection for influence. The room went silent. Adrian continued. Caleb's mother helped design this center long before I inherited my first company. Caleb has accepted no money, no position, and no contract from me. He has endured public humiliation because someone believed his designation made him an easy target. The reporter tried to interrupt. Adrian did not allow it. If you wish to question my decisions, question me. You will not reduce an innocent man to a stereotype simply because he lives under my protection. Caleb looked at him beneath the ballroom lights. No one had ever defended him that openly. But Adrian had used the word protection, not love. And when the board announced an emergency vote to remove Adrian as CEO, Caleb's fear became unbearable. The repair department building passed inspection 3 days later. Caleb made his decision alone. If he stayed, the press would continue using him against Adrian. If he left, perhaps Adrian could convince the board their arrangement had always been temporary. When Adrian came home, Caleb was sitting beside the lavender plant. My apartment is ready. Adrian stopped. When? Next week. A long silence followed. Adrian's watch loosened beneath his fingers. That is good news, he finally said. Caleb waited for something more. It never came. Yes, Caleb whispered. It is. Over the following days, the penthouse changed in reverse. Sketchbooks disappeared into boxes. The blanket vanished from the sofa. Caleb removed his mother's photograph from the bedroom. Adrian spent longer hours inside his office, believing Caleb wanted independence and that asking him to stay would misuse the power difference between them. Caleb believed Adrian was relieved the scandal would finally leave with him. Both men suffered in silence while convincing themselves they were being respectful. The night before the move, Caleb passed Adrian's office and heard him speaking to an assistant. Once Mr. Brooks leaves, return the East Wing to its previous condition. Caleb stepped away before hearing the rest. Inside the office, Adrian continued. But leave the living room exactly as it is. The plants, the paintings, the lavender, everything. I don't want this home to forget him, even if I have to. Caleb never heard those words. The following morning, Adrian left before sunrise for the emergency board vote. 2 boxes waited beside the elevator. Caleb walked through the apartment one last time. He touched the piano Adrian had begun playing again. He straightened the painting purchased from the young Omega at the market. He carried the lavender plant toward the boxes, then stopped. It belonged beside the window. Some things were too deeply rooted to survive being moved. Across Manhattan, Victor Mercer presented the board with photographs, anonymous claims, and false financial records. He accused Adrian of compromising corporate governance for an Omega lover. Adrian listened without interrupting. When Victor finished, Adrian placed a drive on the table. His investigators had traced the leaked photographs to Victor's assistant. Building records proved Victor had accessed the penthouse without authorization. Audio from the security system captured his attempt to pay Caleb. Financial audits revealed that Victor had fabricated the contracts used to accuse him. The room erupted. Victor's confidence disappeared. You would destroy this company over one Omega, he demanded. Adrian looked at him. No. You endangered this company because you believed an Omega had no power to defend himself. The board removed Victor and referred the evidence to authorities. Adrian was unanimously retained as CEO. Everyone expected him to remain for the announcement. Instead, Adrian looked at the time. Caleb's moving company would arrive in 20 minutes. He stood. A director stared at him. Where are you going? Adrian closed the folder. To stop the biggest mistake of my life. At the penthouse, the elevator chimed. Caleb lifted the first box. The doors opened before he could step forward. Adrian entered without his coat. His breathing was uneven, his hair had fallen out of place, and every trace of professional composure had disappeared. His eyes moved from Caleb to the boxes. "You were leaving." Caleb tightened his grip. "I thought you would be at the board meeting." "I was." "What happened?" "Victor is gone." The evidence cleared both of us. Relief passed through Caleb, followed by the pain he had been trying to suppress. "Then you'll be fine." He stepped toward the elevator. Adrian moved into his path, but did not touch him. "Please don't go." Caleb looked up. "You said my apartment reopening was good news." "I lied." The admission hung between them. Adrian took a slow breath. "I said it because I believed asking you to stay would be selfish. You came here because you had no choice. I am an alpha, your host, and your name has been dragged through the press because of me. I thought loving you meant giving you back your freedom." Caleb's heart stopped. "Loving me?" Adrian's cedar scent entered the air, unhidden but gentle. "Yes." Caleb stared at him. Adrian continued before fear could silence him again. "Before you arrived, I had a beautiful apartment and no reason to come home. Then you filled the kitchen with terrible singing and left pencils on every surface. You argued with me about breakfast. You made me play the piano again. You brought life into rooms I had mistaken for a life." Tears gathered in Caleb's eyes. "I heard you tell someone to return my room to the way it was. The East Wing was designed for guests. I don't want you living there as a guest." Adrian stepped closer. "I want you beside me, as my equal, as the person I choose, and only if you choose me freely." Caleb's hands trembled around the box. "You wrote a rule telling me not to mistake obligation for affection. I wrote it because affection frightened me more than obligation. And now losing you frightens me more." The box slipped from Caleb's hands and landed softly on the carpet. Adrian looked toward the elevator and then back at him. "If you leave because you want your own life, I will help you carry every box. I will never use money, instinct, or gratitude to hold you here. But if any part of you is leaving because you think I don't want you," his voice broke for the first time, "then please stay." Caleb crossed the space between them. "I spent my whole life believing alphas wanted omegas to become smaller so they could feel powerful," he whispered. "You were the first one who made me feel safe without asking me to surrender anything." Adrian's eyes closed briefly. Caleb continued. "I didn't fall for your penthouse. I didn't fall for your name. I fell for the man who left his own home because an omega behind a locked door needed to feel safe." Adrian opened his eyes. "Does that mean you'll stay?" Caleb looked toward the lavender plant glowing in the morning light. "No." Pain crossed Adrian's face. Caleb reached for his hand. "It means I won't stay because of a foundation agreement or because my apartment flooded. I'll stay because I love you too." For one heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then Adrian lifted his free hand toward Caleb's face and stopped before touching him. "May I?" Caleb smiled through his tears. "Yes." Adrian cupped his cheek and kissed him. It was not demanding. It carried none of the possession the tabloids had tried to assign them. It was careful, trembling, and filled with every feeling they had hidden between shared breakfasts and quiet evenings. When they separated, Caleb rested his forehead against Adrian's. "What happens to the fourth house rule?" Adrian glanced at the folder still resting on a nearby shelf. "I plan to destroy it." Caleb smiled. "Good." He picked up the box and carried it away from the elevator. Then he placed the lavender plant back beside the window. 1 year later, morning sunlight filled a penthouse that no longer resembled the silent museum Caleb had first entered. Books crowded the shelves. Fresh flowers brightened the dining table. Caleb's framed illustrations covered the hallway, and 2 coffee cups waited beside the kitchen window every morning. The lavender plant had grown so large that Adrian claimed it required its own legal address. Caleb's children's book about the lonely fox had become a bestseller. On the dedication page, he had written, "For the person who taught me that home is not where you are allowed to stay. It is where you are freely chosen." The Eleanor Sterling Community Arts Center opened that spring. Its classrooms provided free painting, music, writing, and illustration programs. Its legal office supported omegas facing housing discrimination, while its emergency residence offered safe rooms to anyone displaced during a crisis. The young watercolor artist from the market received the center's first scholarship. Caleb became its creative director, not because Adrian handed him the position, but because an independent committee unanimously selected his proposal. Adrian still worked too much. Caleb still reminded him to eat. They still argued about whether coffee counted as breakfast. But Adrian no longer measured success only through reports, acquisitions, or headlines. He measured it in quieter ways. Caleb's pencils beside his laptop, music returning to the piano, laughter from the kitchen, and the warmth of knowing someone was waiting when the elevator doors opened. At the center's opening celebration, Caleb found Adrian standing beneath the photograph of Eleanor Sterling and Miriam Brooks. "Do you think they planned all of this?" Caleb asked. "Our mothers. The emergency program. The penthouse. Us." Adrian considered the question. "My mother was intelligent, but arranging a water main failure from beyond the grave seems ambitious." Caleb laughed. Adrian reached for his hand. "I think they opened a door," he said. "We decided whether to walk through it." That evening, they returned to the penthouse carrying flowers, thank you letters, and drawings from dozens of children. Caleb stood beside the windows while Manhattan glowed below them. "Do you ever think about the day I arrived?" he asked. "Every day. I believe this place was a beautiful prison." Adrian stepped beside him. "And now?" Caleb looked around the home they had built together. At the paintings, at the open piano, at the lavender leaning toward the glass. Then he looked at the alpha who had never asked him to become less omega in order to be loved. "Now it's the first place where I've ever felt completely free." Adrian lifted Caleb's hand and kissed his fingers. Months earlier, an accident had forced an omega with nowhere to go into the home of a billionaire alpha who believed he needed no one. Caleb had entered carrying one bag and a heart trained to expect rejection. Adrian had welcomed him out of obligation and protected himself with rules. Neither imagined that shared meals, quiet acts of respect, and the courage to defend one another would transform an unwanted arrangement into the most important choice of their lives. Caleb never returned to his old apartment. Not because he needed Adrian's wealth. Not because an agreement required him to stay. And not because instinct had decided his future for him. He stayed because Adrian saw him as an equal, before seeing him as an omega. Adrian loved him without ownership, protected him without control, and opened the doors of a beautiful but empty home without demanding anything in return. In the end, the cruelest prison had never been the penthouse. It had been the fear that convinced two lonely people they were safer without love. And the moment they finally opened their hearts, every locked place inside them became a home. How would you rate Caleb and Adrian's love story on a scale of 1 to 10? Let us know in the comments. And if you believe the right person can transform even the loneliest place into a home, subscribe for more emotional stories about unexpected love.